I'm really glad to be in conversation with two very eminent authors. And of course, the topic of this panel excites me a lot, particularly in today's age when we are dealing with a lot of issues around pluralism, multiculturalism, and not able to assimilate maybe in many, many ways. So thank you so much. And to start the discussion, I think it would be nice to steer around the title of our panel, which is claiming space, and thereby to talk about definitely about translations, but also about Indian literature as a whole, and how do we even look at Indian literature, or is there a way to call a literature that is national literature, given that I think now we recognize, our constitution recognizes 22 official languages, out of which 21 are modern Indian languages. And despite that, there are so few academic departments that are teaching Indian languages in our country right now, and we are still struggling with the primacy of Hindi as national language, whereas whether at all there could be a national language, because this claim in itself is a very problematic claim. And thereby maybe, since both of you are working with very important works of translation, if we could just discuss that what are thereby, since translation is a work of hierarchical ordering, and on one hand there is the primacy of Hindi, but also English remains as the language of privilege and power. How can we look at the choices that a translator makes in terms of additions, deletions in the choice of texts, and how do we approach Indian literature? How do we approach Indian literature as a whole? If you could just start with that, related to the work that you're doing.
Ranjita, you start.
Firstly, namaskar. Very nice to be here, the invitation of Valley of Words. And let me confess, after almost 2 years of online discussions, it's a relief to be offline.
It is.
Any day. Because somebody also asked me whether you want to read a book or, read in Kindle and all. I said, anytime a book. You can hold it in your hands, you can, anyway. Going back to translation, see, translators were, to use a word which is not very in favor, was always treated as a stepmotherly fashion. Because not all stepmothers are bad anyway, that belongs to the folk tales. Because, you see, if you look back at translation, the translator's name never came, it didn't figure in the book cover, only the writer. Now, from 50s and Sahitya Academy started Bhasha, translation of Bhasha, and later Katha, which used a lot of translations. So translations were kind of, I'm talking about the Indian literature scene. Translations were, yes, you are right, it was always more into Hindi or say into English maybe. But that area was not very explored. From that stage, we must say it has come a long way, from 50s, of course, slowly. The thing is that if you talk about national literature, why predominance of Hindi or English? See, if I want to read a book written in Malayalam, I cannot, because for Hindi I can understand, but Hindi I cannot read like a, literature as such. So if I read it, I have to read it in English, right? And the good thing is that lots of books are being translated from Indian regional language today, either to, inter-regional, say from Assamese to Bangla, or who are, conversant to Hindi from, because I remember one of the best books I read in translation was Jayamitra's Gypsy Nadir Dhara, which is Ajit Kaur's autobiography. From Hindi he shares, because I think she was from Ranchi, she knew Hindi very well. But otherwise, whether you like it or not, English translation predominates. The other thing we must admit, most of our children, our own children, we send to them English medium schools, right? And there's always a grouse that even in Assam I had, our children don't read in Assamese. Even abroad, I mean diaspora, I have lots of friends in US and all, they want to introduce their children to Assamese literature as such or Indian literature as such. They can do only through translations. So maybe that's why it is kind of, I'm not going into the politics of dominant language. The other thing is, you were asking about whether a debate about national, this is my answer to that. I think Anita can add to what I'm trying to say. Her books have been translated. My book was translated, one Arupa Patangia Kalita's book, which he's shortlisted. Her first book I translated was Oyananta for Zuban. At that time it was Kali for women. And that time from English it was translated to Hindi. So you have to go through a via media, in fact. Because there are very few people who, maybe one knows Assamese and Bangla because our script is the same and we are neighbors. But otherwise, a person translating from Assamese to Hindi or vice versa, it's slightly still, I'm not talking about Hindi, maybe Malayalam, maybe Telugu, whatever. So the via media comes to be English. That's why we have much, more numbers of books today. And luckily, I think it's a good thing. Sorry, Anita, I'm taking some more time.
Please go ahead. No.
All the good thing is the big publishing houses today have their own, sections for translations. Because the book, as she mentioned, I got the Sahitya Academy Award. That was also a collection of short stories by same author, but it was on a theme of conflict situation in the Northeast. That was taken up by HarperCollins. So there is more scope for translations today, and I think those people who like to translate, it is the time to grab the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Anita, will you speak a little bit?
Well, thank you very much. Debaroti and Ranjita are meeting after about 2 years now.
Yeah, and the big book fair last time. Yes.
Sanjeev, thank you for the opportunity of meeting real people, with the dimensions intact. And 31st October I declared. I did about 60 online sessions during the lockdown. Then I developed such a huge screen fatigue that I told all the friends that no more online event. And even if I have an offline program with 10 people, I'll be very happy to go. So here I am.
You're more than 10.
We're more than 10 and very interesting people. Well, I would say that, I cannot go into the theories of translation, etc. I will just briefly talk about the experiences of an author, Bengali author, who has been translated. In fact, I have been extremely lucky among my contemporaries that I have been translated a lot in the sense that 25 years back, Kalpana Bardhan, when she had just taken a retirement from University of California at Berkeley, and she got into translation. She was translating Advaita Mallabarman, Titas, then she translated Manik Bandhopadhyay, and she spent 6 months. That's a very unusual way of translating. 6 months reading, I would say several of my, novels, short stories and essays. Basically she would call them journals. She actually read through all of them. Then she selected, I think, 10-15 pieces out of them, made it an edited volume, and she wrote a huge, quite a big introduction of me as an author, which is very flattering for me. I can't imagine, because normally a book is translated, then it is brought out. But Kalpana, they actually spent over 6 months just reading a young author who was nobody compared to even the senior writers of Bengal or, the kind of legends she was herself transferring. But the effect was beautiful. It was a book of multiple genres. Initially the publishers had some hesitation because the book had a novel, the book had 6 short stories, and book had 5 journals. So it was brought out as Forest Interludes by Kali for Women because Zuban had come later. And though the book was not, I would say, I don't think it is a big hit or something, but this book got into Swedish after a few years, which was very unusual, a language I cannot read. But I actually went to Sweden, reading out from my Bengali and English before an audience who may be understanding English but not Bengali certainly. So, looking back from that time and now, even during lockdown, while my Bengali books have taken a bit of time because everything was, kind of caught up in the pipeline, two of my books, translations again got published during the lockdown. One is my novel Mahanadi, which was brought out by Niyogi Books, and the other is my Bengali novel Kaste, which has been brought out as the sequel by the Jagannath Books. We were just discussing about that. Good news, because it is not a very good time for a book to be out, because bookshops are closed and for English books online is not the only thing that works. But it was good news, I felt it is happy, felt good holding the books, and I would certainly say that though it is not doing as well as it should, translation, the process, the market, the readership, everything is very vibrant right now. Right now is a good time. And one thing Ranjita mentioned, I entirely agree with you, that like I do speak and read and write Bengali, Hindi, Marathi and Odia, and of course English and Hindi, all these languages. So if I want, I can translate from Marathi, Hindi and Odia also, which I have done already. Not big books, but poetry and short pieces. We do need, I would not look at something like a national literature. I would say we have enough Indian languages, we have enough Indianness embedded in them, and Indian, whatever is the spirit of India content, and these works are happening. So if we look at that, then I would say that there is a genuine problem in the sense, there was a survey sometime back done, you must have seen this, that West Bengal has not done too well as a state where percentage of people knowing more than 2 languages. I think it's only 17%. The other states which are better, many states speak multiple languages. We do need people who can translate from one language to the other. Unfortunately, we do not have the same way of exchange. For example, I have been working in Odisha for a lot of time. I have worked in Bengal and also in Delhi. There was a time when Odia readers would read such a lot of Bengali. Bengali would be translated to Odia. But then there is a process. For example, Bengalis are very lazy. Within quotes, they won't translate other Indian languages into their language, but they love to be translated. So, beyond a point, the second generation kind of gave up. But it was there. Even our present generation reads a lot of Bengali. In fact, my own book, Mahanadi, is again being done into Odia. I was very keen because Mahanadi, the river, has flown from Chhattisgarh and mostly through Odisha, then Bay of Bengal. So I thought it is very much a Odia book because it has all the cultural nuances and history, oral history, stories of Odisha, woven around the river. So it is being now done by the Odisha Sahitya Academy is doing the book into Odia. So Odia readers are kind of waiting. So this process, we need definitely more people who know more than 2 Indian languages so the translation happens. But apart from that, lot of translation is still happening from English. It may not be the best way, I am sure, but then it is happening, and I would say that when you translate a book, it is not just one language you transfer to another. The entire language, the language has a history, it has people's stories, it has unspoken things, it has emotions, nuances, everything gets transported, and the translator is, I would say, most valiant person because literally without bringing herself or himself into focus, the translation is done. And I would just conclude this part of what I am saying with a very touching story. Some time back, I was invited by writers of Tamil literature to a place, to a literature festival. It's called Vishnupuram Literary Forum in Coimbatore. There I was the only person who didn't follow Tamil, the entire discourse for 4 days went on in Tamil only. No other language was spoken. And it was packed hall, 400 people, starting with breakfast, ending at dinner. And nobody would move, and everybody had come prepared. Nobody will ask a casual question. They have been asked to read the books involved and come prepared. And they are not like we have in Kolkata, the readers who basically teach or write or they are educated. They are auto drivers, they were pump mechanics, they were car drivers, they are agriculturists who have come for a literature festival. It's fascinating. So there I met a gentleman called Mr. Shankaran, who found a book of mine which Nandini Guha translated from Bengali.
Oh, Nandini.
Akal Bodhan was translated as The Awakening. Mr. Shankaran asked me, what is this book about? I told him the story. It's a novel on the 70s and involving life of a clay image maker as well as a girl's search for her father who was missing in the action in the 70s. He has translated this book. Now it is coming out in Tamil. And I don't know what appealed to him because the book is a very Bengali book. It is about, Kolkata Pratima Shilpi and things which are not at all national in that sense. But he was telling me that reading parts of the book, he actually wept. So what do I say to this? Through English, which might have been a barrier in this case, he got into what I wanted to say, and now the book is in Tamil because of the lockdown delays. It is coming out end of this month. So this is how translation can unite, and I see a lot of possibility of Indians speaking to each other, either straight to their respective languages or if necessary through English. I don't, the Hindi, I don't take this debate seriously at all. Hindi is not our national language. Hindi is an official language. It's a language of work in government.
Like all the other official languages.
So Hindi has been trying to be national language, it has not succeeded. Let Hindi writers, activists, people do whatever they want for their language. We should focus on whatever we want to do. I would really say that the way children pick up, let us say, German and French and other languages which matter today, if they could, be interested in learning languages which are spoken at home, spoken within the country, this stream could be enriched. But it's a question of choice. But I don't see any reason to lose heart at this moment. And I think it is quite hopeful. In fact, Bengali is a language from which the largest number of books have been done into English. But unfortunately, our own Bengali readers have no idea because this need to be made into an index and told to people. We don't know. So somebody should work out a database of whatever has been translated from that language to other languages, and then it can be shared with the writer because there are Bengali readers who may like to read an English book, or he may know Hindi, who has to read a Hindi book. So this information database of books translated from one Indian language to English, or English also is an Indian language, and other Indian languages, that at least in Bengali is not available right now. We could do something about it.
Yeah, I can just add one thing. I also do book reviews. Recently, last year, just before I think all this lockdown, I was sent this book called The Best of Uriya Short Stories. Wonderful stories, unless those stories are translated to English, and it goes a lot of reference to Bengal, because Bengal people coming from Odisha to Bengal to work. So many of them are set in rural Odisha or Odisha, whatever called now. But the stories are so nice. That's why I'm saying, unless they are translated, you don't get introduced to even our own regional language. It is not possible, so I don't think that talking about hegemony of Hindi or English, it really is. As Anita said, let's do our work, and if people are interested, they will read. Now her book is being translated to Tamil. That's wonderful news, That's
And I think very importantly, what both of you pointed out just now is the need to, because we do grow up in a multilingual situation all the time, the need to also probably have, because I feel that the work of translation is also a way of making passage into our own history and into our own culture. So it's it's an extremely creative process and the process of a literary historian. So I believe that somewhere, the translations from inter-regional languages that both of you talked about, apart from English, is important. But also what is important, I think, because literature, of course, stems from language, but it is not restricted within language. It is culture. So somewhere, even when you are writing, when your texts are translated into English, or you're translating a regional literature into English and making it available for readers to read, I think there is, what really touches at the core is a kind of shared history, a shared consciousness, which is retained in the oral stories, the folk stories that when I was even reading your work, the translation of Loneliness of Hira Barua, there's a lot of folk, there are motives from the folk tales, from oral stories, songs. Certain words are being retained in terms of, stitching, attire, food. So, which becomes part of this shared history. And it really at a point, it takes a back seat that which language you're translating it takes a back seat, but what becomes more important is how you are making a passage into that history and that culture. So this is something I wanted to ask both of you, that in terms of related to your work, what are the choices that you make in terms of retaining the themes, or when you're working as a translator, how do you make those passages? What is the creative process?
Yeah, Debaroti, thank you for asking this. Let me share one thing. When I first, Arupa Patangia Kalita is one of my, I have translated other very well-known writers like Humayun Borgohain, who has recently expired, Bhavendranath Saikia for Sahitya Academy, and others. Now, when I read Ananta, this is set just before pre-independence Assam. And then when I read it, I don't know how many people know, Christian Baptist missionaries have a huge role in Assam's modern Assamese language development. They came for actually, Baptist missionaries came for their own establishing their missionaries. What they did, they learned the Assamese language, local language. And they were the first people to establish a press, like in Srirampur in Bengal. And they, believe me, there was a book, I have the whole, they took out a magazine called Arunchal. And this much. They introduced international stories, then scientific things and all translated to Assamese. Now, so in Arupa's first book, which I translated, she gives a background, this young girl, she always wanted to learn. And one young Baptist missionary visiting their village to collect old manuscripts. It's called Sachipat. Sachi is a tree. They used to write in Sachi old times. So then this girl who always wanted to learn, she falls in love with this Baptist missionary guy. Of course, that is an impossible situation. Now, then she, of course, married off to somebody, she becomes a mother, but always that thing was there. How she developed herself from that pre-independence Assam to just a dawn of, and she retained her independence even after she became a mother and, led her own life. Now, when I read this book, I thought, as you said, it is not only a Bangla Jeta Bole ba Assamese a Sahityik Mulya, it was also a history of looking just pre-independence India to independence, and how, we always missed a woman's story, right? Always stories were written, so that attracted me very much. Then I didn't know, I suggested myself to Califor women, I think this book deserves to be translated. So they immediately, I sent 1 or 2 chapters maybe, then Urvashi Butalia, and I think at the time, this one also there.
Ritu was there.
Ritu Menon. So they liked it, and but what I did, as you said, to transfer I did not know Arupa Patangi at that time. She used to stay in a, she just retired, in a place called Tongla, just at the base of Bhutan hills, border of Assam and Bhutan. She consciously took a job there as an English professor, including her husband, who is a very well-known critic, because they had certain leftist leanings and all. They wanted to stay in a place where it is less developed. In Bangla you said Bapir Bari. So my my ancestral house is not far from there. I went and stayed with her for 2 days. For her, as she said, somebody went through all her works to select her work, Anita. I went because, see, I am brought up always in urban thing. So I was worrying whether those Gramir Bhasha or the village, nuances will come out. It is a constantly learning process for a translator. So I said that can I go and discuss with you? This is how I have translated, whether I have brought out nuance. So she said, no, come and stay with me, then we'll discuss. From then on, of course, relationship between her and me, as a translator writer, has grown. But I think a translation, I think people all nowadays like the word transcreation, because translation itself is a creation, right? Yes. You just don't, I went, I ate, that kind of translation. You have to realize and know. And it is also very important to see nowadays one thing I think is happening in lots of states of India. I do not know about Tamil Nadu and all. It's a heavily tilted towards reading, English adolescent stories, everything, and neglecting the own language. In Bengal, I find, even in book fair, lots of people queue out to buy books for children. That is quite, I like it. But own language, what happens, they lose touch with the language. So nowadays, if you say Assam, I must say Assamese short stories is supposed to be one of the best in India. But very few people translate. I won't say I'm the only one, people are doing. But thing is, people don't introduce because they are not translated. Because lots of people say that we speak Assamese and all, we are not very sure whether, the Sahitik, the literature thing will come out. So to transform, as you have seen in this book, there is a story called Stream. The stream is what? She actually, the lady who is the protagonist, she is from Bengal. She gets married to somebody in a remote place in tea garden. So she used to love singing, but her in-laws did not like, Brahmin bohu and not singing after marriage and all. What she did, her creativity, the Assamese word is Nijora. Nijora Bangla spring. So she diverts her own creativity to cooking. Not that she ate much, neither her doctor husband, but she used to, all the time she's trying this fish with this sag and all. So in that story, you get a lot of information about, I won't say information, you get to know local Assamese fish, local vegetables, and how people combine with what. And I'm quite sure in Bengali, we have so many dishes, they'll resonate. Now the thing is that sometimes what becomes the problem, I'll let Anita continue.
No, please don't bother. We're enjoying listening to you.
Yeah, if somebody asks me what is the, maybe that will be asked later, what are the challenges, of translating a regional language to English. I basically translate to English, so I can talk about it. Maybe you can talk about it later. Anita will add to it. Anita?
If you would like to add to this.
Yeah.
Yes, I think 2 things. It's wonderful the way you went to find out Arupa Patangya Kalita. She has been translated and her work has been acclaimed all over the, for the pan-Indian readers. Well, this is the kind of initiative you need. As a translator, I have not done much. I have translated Marathi and Oriya poetry into Bengali. Many of these have been brought out in the periodicals. Oriya, Shitakanta Mahapatra's poetry translated. It came out as a book. I don't think the book is available anymore. What is interesting is, you develop a friendship with the author whose work you translate, because you go back to him, you keep talking to him, and what the translator gains in the process, the insight into the writer's mind, that is what is most, that is the most important thing. Right now what I am doing is a big book which the Kendriya Sahitya Academy has given me to translate. It is called Oral Epics of Kalahandi. And the book has been drawn from Oriya to English, then from English to Hindi. I am doing now from Hindi to Bengali. But it is such a joy because Kalahandi is a district, because I worked in Odisha and I did a lot of traveling other than what my job required. Places like Kalahandi, Koraput, I extensively traveled. There are villages, there are places, rivers, and everything. I am so familiar, and this is about the oral epics in the sense what we understand by epic is mostly Ramayana, Mahabharata, the mainstream epics. But in Kalahandi, and it will be the same thing in other districts, the epics are the local heroes. A local milkman's son, Goalar Chele, he is the hero. The story is almost like vanquishing the evil people and then marrying a girl, and in between lot of things are happening. But when you read, it's a fascinating discourse of the world which many of us have never seen. So I am doing this book, and the author Mohendra Mishra, who is a very well-known folklorist of Odisha, he is, in fact, we worked in primary education way back, where we were trying to develop tribal language primers for tribal children, so that their learning is not constrained by, because they don't speak Odia or Hindi at home. They speak a language which sometimes don't even have script, sometimes it is script. So we are trying to write a 2 script primer for them, so that they learn the same thing in, let us say, Saura language in Odisha and Odia language.
Such a meaningful work.
And this work has been taken up by Chhattisgarh government now.
Wow.
Now what they are doing is Hindi, what they learn in school, primary school children, they are also being done simultaneously. One book has 3 pages for each picture in Gondi, Dhurvi, because that is the language they speak. And the teachers were telling me recently when I visited Chhattisgarh that their participation in class has improved. Earlier they used to sit quiet because they don't speak Hindi at home.
So they would feel alienated.
Alienated. So, this is the kind of thing, a world gets opened up before your eyes, and it is very important because you all know what Ganesh Devi has said, the way we are losing languages. Every day we are losing languages because languages which are not spoken by enough number of people are falling off. So, it is a whole thing. I mean, there is a mechanism, there is a market, there is capital, there is a reason why suddenly Mandarin becomes important or English becomes important. But I would say that we are a large country. We are a large country, we are a very dynamic country. Lot of things are happening. When I visit rural areas, when I go to a village, I see the local, I would say, minds at work, the stories being told, the stories being written. There is a world altogether which is hidden from our eyes, which needs to be discovered, not only for the sake of translation, but for the sake of, I would say, though it sounds big, for understanding your own country. Yes. Like I and Mohendra Babu, the writer of Oral Epics of Kalahandi, we again went to Kalahandi, we went to Niyamgiri Hills, we went to Sunabeda Plateau, which is the biggest place from where a river called Jonk has flown. So we revisited the places in which his stories, his oral history, epics have come. We met the old people, because narrators are also reducing in number. No? Oral epics are basically not written anywhere. They are narrated by the village singer. He is a clan bard. When the clan person sings in a festival, you have to sit down, and he won't just sing you. If you go and tell him that please sing this, he is not going to do this. No. You have to give him the right time, the right festival, then he will sit, and then he sings out. Mohendra Babu has recorded all this, And then he has translated into from Odia to into Odia first and then to other languages. So now I am doing that part from now Hindi to Bengali. So I think it is going to bring for Bengali authors, Bengali readers, a huge gift, you know, almost like a unseen treasure. So I am enjoying the process, and I am not only writing. Maybe I have done 100 pages, but I will make a trip. I will go over. I will again come back and start writing. So for me, it's a combination of, you know, a journey, which is not only intellectual journey, but also actually real journey for meeting the real people. So this is what translation can reinforce.
Yeah, that reminds me, I did a book called Folk Tales from Arunchal Pradesh, Meghalaya and Assam. Because as Anita says, our old ethnic tribes is always oral history, right? Only now in Khasi language, actually Khasis never had of Meghalaya, they never had a script. Only the missionaries came, that's why they speak Khasi, but they write in Roman script, right? So I selected the stories, you know, which to. So for them, because it's a matrilineal society, for them the son is not a male, it's a female, right? And also there is a talk about peacock. We never thought that peacock always belongs to Rajasthan or North India. But the story, how the peacock got its colors is a Meghalaya story or Khasi story. So it's a, you know, wild, and Arunachal also a story I did. So I found, because I'm from Assam, I know folk tales. I have just recently, it is in the process of, in the press, folk tales of Assam, which in Bangla is Thakumar Jhuli. In Assamese we call it Buriyar Hadhu. Buriyar means grandmothers. Hadhu or Sadhu story. Those we are familiar from childhood. But even our neighboring country, I'm ashamed to say, we didn't know much about Meghalaya, though I grew up in Shillong. I didn't know much of, you know, Meghalaya's folk stories. Now that I have started translating, selecting, and also, you know, people like Deven Datta, he's an anthropologist, he has a huge collection of oral tradition. So the translation has introduced me to the stories I did not know before.
No, I would say that an author has to constantly, you know, break and challenge oneself. All important Bengali authors have been translating. And Navanita Devsen has done a lot of translation herself. All our contemporary, you know, people who write with me, they are doing a lot of translation from Indian languages. In fact, very recently a book has been done on Bharatiya Kavita and Nari Shor, Indian women writing in poetry. The book has been so well, you know, appreciated in Bengali. It has got translation from all Indian languages, of course through English or other languages into Bengali, but it has come out as such a beautiful, you almost feel you are listening to, you know, kind of a symphony of so many myriad women's voices in Bengali. So these things are happening. There is a Kolkata Translators Forum that has come. So if we, as you said, that as a you know, mature writer, you thought of translating from Khasi. Unless you break your own, you know, barrier and go out and learn more things, you get into the same groove and keep reading and saying the same thing. There is no fun.
No, there is another thing I have got grouse. See, I have recently, it is in the process of being published this December. The stories are emerging, because you are talking about women's voice. I see, there is, you must have heard about Mamani Roisham Goswami or Indira Goswami, Gyanpith Award. Her generation, I have done her stories also. Then Sneha Devi, then Nirupama Borgohai, Homan Borgohai's wife. The next generation, Orupa Patangia Kolita, then Puravi Mormuda. The new generation, I discover, and I have been, because I'm in Calcutta, sometimes it's a difficult, you know, unless I get the magazines, which new writers are emerging. I'm talking about women writers. So I went for this Brahmaputra Literary Festival some time back and met all these young writers. They are writing in such diverse stories, you know, and very, very powerful. So sometimes I say translating is a labor of love. Because I started, you know, I collected their stories. You know, collecting, I said, you send me your books, I'll select. So I selected 14 stories, very powerful writers, but they are not known much beyond Assam, because those stories had not been. Now, tell me, very frankly, I went to Jaipur Literary Festival when 2 years back, before the coronavirus. From then my manuscript has been ready. I did not get a publisher. All the big publishers say, we want only novels. I said, please read these stories. They are very powerful stories. And I have been sitting on this manuscript for 2.5 years maybe. But recently, thankfully, one Delhi publisher, they like the stories, they said such. So I'm happy not because, see, I was feeling very bad. All these young writers, they have been sending me stories, books, and they said, oh, Ranjita has promised, nothing has come out of it. They also like to be read outside Assam. So I'm very happy that book is coming out. But otherwise, I find, though in Assam, the short story reading is very much alive, in Bengal also. But when you go for English publisher, they said, no, I don't know what is the reason. One reason may be because lots of lit fest nowadays encourage novels. Maybe? Yeah. That is my surmise. I may not be correct.
No, don't lose heart, Ranjita. At least you have translated. The book is coming out.
I want to
that's
take
what
the
I'm
privilege
happy.
of asking this one last question since both of you are here, which both of you mentioned that women's stories and women's themes, and it's even in the Loneliness of Hira Barua, it is there in a very poignant manner in the aesthetic of daily lives, how women relate to nature, to people, to the intimate spaces, and how very political it is. Also in Mohanodi, which is the story of so many people in so many communities, but that relate to the intimate lives in a very, very powerful way. So if both of you would like to talk about the theme of women's stories and the aesthetic of daily lives and how important it is to convey that world of women's stories, how it is shaped.
Ranjita?
Anita, you can't.
It's much easier to write than to speak about all this.
I mean, also with reference, you may want to talk with reference to your own work, to the stories that you...
If I may, I can.
Yes.
I'd like to read 2 paragraphs from a story called Scream, RT or Scream. Arupa, another thing, this writer, who, she always brings in natural, whether fruits or trees or local landscape into her stories, and comparing emotion. Like in one story, she said her heart was jumping like a kawai fish. Kawai is Bangla koi fish. When you take out from the water, it goes on jumping. So she was so excited, she was getting married and new bride, and she didn't know what to do. And she said her heart was jumping like a kawai fish. That I found very interesting, and I kept it kawai. I did not translate to some English term is there. Another good thing, lots of English publishers nowadays, English language publishers, they want to retain the original word, So maybe glossary afterwards, but otherwise I have found if you explain too much in the same sentence, it gets stilted, it doesn't have the flow. Anyway, this story is about, suppose you are reading in the morning, all of us go and read the newspaper, right? So, the story begins like this. The newspapers draw a picture of a hillock. Every morning, the newspapers build a hillock in front of me. This hillock is not green, nurtured by sun or rain. It's coarse, heartless, made of hard black stones. On this hill, not even a handful of moss grows. It is unable to keep in its womb the sparkle of a spring. Not a single blade of grass peeps from its crevices. It is a hill built out of anger and crudeness. The morning sun wants to visit my flower garden. The flowers wait for him the whole night. The creepers seek out the rays with their soft tendrils. The sunflowers stretch their necks towards the east as they wait, ignoring the creaking pane. The white roses wait, a little crestfallen, for a little bit of sun's first ray of pink to smear them, without which they feel hesitant to bloom into full glory. The patch of land where the Naubaji flowers, Naubaji is a very local flower, so I have kept it like that. Naubaji flowers looking like decorative jewels, get excited. Not much time is left for 9 o'clock when the sun will shine on them. At this moment, most of the birds are half asleep. The tree with flowers that look like powder puffs, little girls use, sleep peacefully too, offering rest to the leaves for the night. Without the warmth of the sun, they still feel a little groggy. Like this, all of them wait for the sun to appear in the sky. The sun too wants to brighten the kitchen garden in the backyard of my house. The raw papayas wait. Sunlight will soften their skins, change their green skin to orange, and make them soft and moist. The mood of the comb of bananas is restless too. Without sunlight, it will become dry and make the skin appear serrated. I'm skipping for there. Who doesn't want the warm rays of the sun? But a cruel hillock shuts it out and casts a shadow over all. The darkness breathes cruelly into my heart, but I am compelled to face the dark hill standing just in front. The heat burns the body, the throat becomes dry, and the chest feels heavy and suppressed with hill's weight. There is no shade, even a little, to give relief. Because every morning the newspapers create these headlines: another massacre, then mentally retarded woman gang raped, then woman burned to death for dowry, then bomb blast at the bus depot, 30 dead, more than 100 injured. University building burned to ashes due to arson. That these are the hill. She is symbolizing this hard hill actually of the time, you know. She's symbolizing nature's beauty and sereneness with what is happening around us. So this is how, you know, used a symbol of the hill.
Very beautiful.
Yeah, I like it.
Wait, I think
if
we
you
have,
want to add
yeah, just,
something,
just
or we can, if there are questions.
no, I'll just add one line that in this big translation of Mahanadi, Nivedita Sen, the translator, has added a beautiful translator's note. Even if people don't read the whole book, I'll request them to read this. And there she has put the whole thing of the translator's dilemma as to how to translate local words, whether to use English equivalents or not. And it's a beautiful discourse. In fact, it can itself be published as a paper.
Piece of paper.
So, just some of the insights of it. And I would say that I won't look at women's writing as something different. It all depends upon the experience which gives rise to this, but the gendered perspective is always there. You cannot just wish it away. That is very much a part of the politics of writing. So I would only say this much, and what else? Is there
I
any question?
just wanted to add one thing. I think, not much time left. I have been asked in different forums, what is the challenge of, as I was saying. See, I'm talking about my language or Assamese. In Bangla also I translate, but because, let me confess, there are so many translators from Bangla to English, but Assamese there are fewer, so I confine myself to that. Anyway, see, relationships in Indian context. Apni jodi bolen kaka and kakima and mama and mummy, actually they are different contextually, right? In Bangladesh, said mama bari jabo, right? So going to mama bari is a freedom, you can do anything. Not so much in it. So if you go just say uncle and aunt in English, it really doesn't bring out the nuance. So what we translate, at least we constantly, use a subtext like, how happy to go to mama bari. This is after our maternal uncle's house only. We can have, just to give an idea for people outside that in Bangla and Assamese, we always, I don't know so much about North India, going to mama bari. The other thing is, I don't know about other translators, translating galagali, ABC words. Really, I mean, sometimes you will be surprised to know cuckoo or dog is a pet, right? In Bangla, and Assamese, can I use the intonation? Cuckoo, that's an abuse. Cuckoo kota. I mean, that means you are such a vile person, The people don't believe that cuckoo can be a kind of. And the other thing, in once I was asked by Homen Borgohain, in fact, he has a fantastic book called Motsya Gandha. Motsya Gandha, you know, the fisherman's daughter who got married with the mythological story. Now, in Assam, the fisher women, their words, I mean, they no holds barred. The kind, even a simple sentence, they will quite abusive words. So it's a slim book, very nice book. Then I thought, if I translate, that was much before now, I was in Guwahati at the time. Then I found if I want to translate these abusive words, maybe, I mean, I was incapable. I didn't have the confidence that I can bring out, you know, letera gali, you know. So I said, sorry, sir. Afterwards, I think his son has done it, Pradipta. So, you know, sometimes translating, and because English doesn't have that kind of abuse anyway. So those are sometimes challenging, but you have to go through it. It's a translator's choice how you have to do it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. If anyone from the audience has any question or...
Everyone is hungry. I
Yeah,
suppose.
we've come to the end of time. Thank you so much, Debaroti, Anita, and Ranjita Biswas. Thank you. From